Hello, and welcome to another episode of Breadcast Anime Talk. Netflix has finally updated Sword Art Online to have both the third and fourth seasons, which is the Alicization arcs. The originals came out in 2020, so thank you Netflix and people who make anime for being 2 years late to the party. I have completely watched Season 3, and so that's what we're going to be talking about. So let me start by talking about what I like about Season 3, all 24 episodes. I like the action, as Sword Art Online is always good on delivering on the action front. I like the new character of Yu-Gi-Oh! That travels around with Kirito, as Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of only 2 characters that actually grow, and no, the other one is not Kirito, but we'll get into that later. Yep, that's kind of all I liked. So what do I not like about Alicization? Pretty much everything I didn't mention. Let's start with how the anime actually starts. The first episode starts with a very much child-looking Kirito hanging out with Yu-Gi-Oh!, who's also a child, who is trying to cut down a tree that is impossible basically to cut down. Of course, we the audience do not know any of that because they don't say any of that in this particular part of the episode. You just get thrown into the first half of the episode without knowing where the characters are, why they're there, what's going on at all, and so on. Like, why does Kirito look and sound like a child? I was so confused when I first started the first episode. Anyway, Kirito wants to get some ice so they can keep their food cold, so he, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Alice, again, all children looking, decide to go to this cave and get some ice. However, Alice sees a knight and ends up tripping and falling in this cave, and her hand goes over the line that separates the human world and the Darklands, and it's literally by like the edge of her fingers that go into the Darklands. And so this causes some weird face thing to pop up in a little portal and log the event, and then the next day an Integrity Knight comes and takes Alice away. Not even Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh can stop it because they're children for some reason. Again, this all just happens with no explanation as to why it's happening, and it's such a confusing way to start the show, but it's only like the first half of the first episode. Before I get into more plot, I will continue with what I don't like about Alicization. First of all, it's really gory. Like, there's a lot of blood in it, and I don't really get why. It's not like I can't handle it or something, but SAO has never had blood or gore in it before, and I don't understand why this one does. Like, the world they're in, called the Underworld, it may not be a VR MMO in the sense that, like, Aincrad was, or that Alfheim Online and GGO are, but, like, it's still that kind of a concept of a virtual world. And there's like, and this isn't like a spoiler, but like in season 4, one character says that, in the underworld, with the machines that they use to get in, that there's no pain dampeners. So I guess VR MMOs like Sword Art Online and Alfheim Online and GGO all have pain dampeners, but that this one doesn't, and that's why there's blood and stuff in it. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. But anyway, the next thing that I don't like, that has been one of the 2 constants in Sword Art Online, is that there's a lot of gross sexual stuff in it. I mean, there's one episode that deals with Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! At this place called Swordcraft Academy that they basically kill 2 of these upper-class snobby noble guys because these upper-class snobby noble guys are about to rape 2 girls that happen to be Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh's pages. There's also in the very last episodes in which the big villain of the show, Administrator, she's just naked whenever she's on screen. But her really long hair covers her tits and her vagina. But she's just constantly naked, which I don't know why it's necessary for her to be. There's also a moment in these later episodes when, like, Yu-Gi-Oh is becoming brainwashed into becoming an Integrity Knight by the Administrator. And it's done where Administrator is basically, like, seducing him, which is totally weird because he's, like, 15. There's a part of an episode where the senator guy agrees to eliminate Alice, Kirito, and Yu-Gi-Oh for Administrator, but he basically asks Administrator for the favor that if he does, if he can have her body all to himself for one night. And she, like, laughs and squeezes one of her boobs and agrees to this. Why was this necessary? I don't know. There's just too much of this unnecessary sexual stuff in the anime. The last thing I don't like about Alicization, and is where I'll get more into the plot, is that Kirito doesn't grow as a character at all. And he's just perfect at everything. This is why earlier I said Yu-Gi-Oh is the best character in this third season, because he actually has to grow as a character. What we learn through the plot is this. So after the first confusing half of the episode, we go to Kirito and the gang in a fight in GGO. From there, Sinon asks Kirito and Asuna in real life to be in the upcoming Bullet of Bullets competition, and they agree. Kirito and Asuna are then walking home when a guy attacks Kirito with the death gun toxin. Now, when Sinon, Asuna, and Kirito were hanging out previously, Kirito tells them that he's been testing some new tech for a company called Wrath, that's R-A-T-H, with this new tech being called a soul translator. The show itself gets into the science fiction mumbo jumbo of it and explains it, but I'm not going to explain it because it's really weird. Anyway, after this guy puts the death gun toxin in Kirito, he wakes up in the underworld not knowing why, and then and that's actually the world that we see in the first half of the first episode. But then they decide to tell us, with the people working at Wrath, that the toxin messed up Kirito's neural network. And the machine that he's in, called an STL, which also is the machine that lets him be in the underworld, is keeping him alive so they can supposedly repair his neural network. And this is something that conventional hospitals would not be able to do. Meanwhile, Kirito is in the underworld and is being his usual amazing self. He gets Yu-Gi-Oh to complete his calling by teaching him sword skills. Yeah, the underworld has sword skills, which is awfully convenient for Kirito, and is exactly what I mean when I say that Kirito doesn't have to grow as a character. He goes into the underworld, which is not a VR MMO like Sword Art Online is, Alpha Online is, or Gun Gale Online is, and yet he can just use sword skills that he knows from being in those past VR MMOs, and thus he becomes the teacher of Yu-Gi-Oh! Kirito doesn't ever struggle in fights unless the plot demands that he show a minor amount of struggle. There's a fight that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to do all on his own against one of the Integrity Knights because Kirito gets hurt pretty bad, and I feel like they only did that because they knew that if Kirito was in this fight and he was able to fight, that the fight would have gotten finished very quickly. Kirito is basically a Mary Sue because he's good at everything all of the time, and he never has to learn new things. Imagine if when being put in the underworld that he has to learn an entirely new combat system and can't just rely upon previous VR MMO combat experience and sword skills and whatnot. Also, can we talk about all this self-righteous speeches that Kirito gives? They also basically forget about the previous SAO characters as well, but like we see Asuna very briefly throughout season 3, but there's like everyone else gets kind of shafted to like maybe 2 appearances throughout season 3. There's also this weird thing with Kirito and Alice where it's like I feel like Alice is falling in love with Kirito, which is weird because Kirito has a girlfriend. Does he just forget about Asuna? I mean, he never mentions her or even thinks about her once until the very last episode. Said very last episode basically ends with a small armed group infiltrating Wrath, cutting the power which sends a surge to the underworld, which does a number on Kirito, who is at a console in the central cathedral after defeating Administrator and having Yu-Gi-Oh sacrifice himself, and Alice is just knocked out on the floor. Yep, that's how Season 3 ends. I really just didn't like Season 3 of Sword Art Online very much. I've seen numerous videos on YouTube of people saying that Seasons 3 and 4 are great, and that it's the best that Sword Art Online has been in years. And I disagree. I've even watched some of these videos and they just skip talking about all of the gross sexual stuff, the unnecessary amount of blood, and how Kirito is just a Mary Sue character. Yeah, the action's good, the animation looks a lot better than the first season of Sword Art Online, and the character design is pretty cool, but to me that doesn't excuse the gross sexual stuff, the unnecessary amounts of blood, unnecessary nudity, and the lack of character growth for Kirito. I hope that Season 4 is better, and yes, I will be making a video on it when I finish watching Season 4. Sword Art Online Alicization Season 3 is just not good, and I cannot recommend it as much as I would like to, especially being a Sword Art Online fan. I just can't recommend it, you know? But that's all I have to say, so if you want to end the conversation, leave a comment below. As always, thanks for listening, and goodbye.